Hello and welcome to a very special edition of The Big Fight. Today we're going to be taking a look at the boundary between the state and religion. And a couple of incidents have really happened to get us thinking about this. As much as we applaud India for its diversity and its pluralism, there are days and there are times when we wonder, do Indians sometimes really push the limits when it comes to religion? Do we take it to extremes where state intervention sometimes becomes necessary? Take, for instance, the recent case of the very 13-year-old Aradhana from Secunderabad, who fasted for more than 2 months, surviving on little other than boiled water. 2 days after she completed that fast, Aradhana suffered a cardiac arrest that her young, famished body could not survive. The young monk, or Bal Tapaswi as she was called, was then adorned like a goddess, as her funeral procession was taken into a shobha yatra, perhaps for others to follow. Now, we all have to ask our questions. Did we some way fail her as a teacher, as a community, her peers and her elder, by not raising a voice against it? Others will say, you should not interfere in this. She was essentially carrying out a religious function. She was doing what her religious devotion asked for, and therefore there is nothing which anyone else should do. And if anyone, including the state, tries to interfere, it is a question of intervening in interfering in people's religious beliefs. And now we're seeing that same thing being repeated one more time when the entire debate and discussion happens over triple talaq. Now, again, should the state be intervening? Because it's a question of the fundamental rights of Muslim women. But the Muslim Personal Law Board says, no, you're not. You should not be doing anything about this. There is no uniform civil code. And therefore, when the state or anybody else tries to intervene in this matter, you are interfering in our religious practices. So, all right, where do we stand on this issue? And that's really what we're going to try and figure out. So, a range of people joining us to take us through all of this. First, great pleasure to welcome into the studio Zakia Soman, who's the founder member of the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, really been spearheading the campaign against triple talaq. And standing next to her, somebody she spent a lot of time arguing with in the last week and certainly in the last few months, Kamal Farooqi, founder executive member of the All India Muslim Personal Law Board, which just came out in very strong terms and said it's going to boycott the Law Commission's questionnaire and things like that. But moving on to the other subject, it's great to have with us in the studio Vinod Tikku, who's the founder member of the NCPCR, he's a child rights activist. We have with us Mridu Jain, who's the publisher of Jain Philosophy books. Rupen Doshi is with us, a recruitment consultant who belongs to the Jain community. Joining us from Lucknow is Maulana Khalid Rashid Firangi Mahili, who's another member of the Muslim Personal Law Board. And we are being joined from Trivandrum by Rahul Ishwar, who's an author and an activist. Can I just start off, Vinod, with you and the question of Aradhana? Now, here's a young girl doing it voluntarily. I don't think anyone is saying that she was coerced into doing this, carrying out her religious beliefs, but obviously it is something that her 13-year-old body could not take. So now you've had a situation where her parents have been charged with culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Are there questions that all of us need to answer in this case?
As a society, we have been at times brainwashing children with certain religious fundamental values, which I think we should not. And a child at the age of 9, 10, 11 is not really mature enough to understand those issues. And we force them in a way to get into those religious paths where probably even an adult would not want to go into. We have taken cognizance of certain things that in the mutts in Karnataka, in the madrasas where children are being doctrined, where in certain other institutions, where at a church, where the children are being actually forced into certain ways of life where the child should not be, because for us, the best place that a child has to be in is the school. We still are depriving children.
So it's not to do with one religion or the other. Children are quite often either voluntarily or otherwise, or you can say that they were being influenced into it, persuaded to get into certain actions. And you're right, it spans all communities. It happens elsewhere. We've had horrific cases of children, for example, being motivated or indoctrinated or whatever into becoming suicide bombers. That's the other extreme, of course, not to be compared or connected with this case. Mridu Jain, let me just turn to you. Now, the Jain community has turned around and said, nobody should say anything about this, it's interfering in our religious beliefs. Is that a correct position to take, you think?
No, whenever there are excesses, the state intervention is required. Now, the state or the legal or the judiciary has its own arena. just like the religious leaders never intervene into the political scenarios. Similarly, if a state has to intervene, first it has to understand the entire tenets, the followings, and then it can pass a judgment, or then it can intervene and then correspondingly bring in, because this kind of a intervention is required when it goes to or crosses any limits.
But didn't this, I mean, doesn't this cross all limits? A young girl, 13-year-old, fasting for 68 days, it's not, doesn't really require rocket science to say that it is going to have a very major impact on her.
See,
it is going to be a threat to her life.
You're right, but then she had been practicing earlier. She did for 7 days, then for 34 days, and then that was a call for her that she felt that she could do it. And she did not die while fasting.
She's 13 years
that's
old.
An inner call.
My 13-year-old son was to look at me and saying, well, I think that there's some kids at the age of 13 often don't know what they should really be doing or not doing. At that point, isn't it the incumbent upon either the parents or the community or the teachers, failing all of which, for the state to say, no, you're endangering her life?
Vikram, let me tell you one thing. When an oath is taken for a fast, it is not at, straight away for 68 days. Every day the oath is renewed. And when the oath is renewed, we do consider the well-being, the vital statistics are taken into account. That is she doing good, and then she goes to the guru and then she takes an oath. It's not that she is bedridden or she is totally immobile and then she's taken others. She's not taken. All her vital statistics were intact. Even after she broke the fast, she was reading a book.
She died within 2 days.
She was reading a book after she'd broken fast.
She died within 2 days.
That's true. So, she did not know that her capacity...
Obviously, she didn't know. She's 13 years old.
That proves, yes.
She is 13 years old. She did not know. 13-year-old children or 14-year-old, 15-year-old, even 17-year-old children do all sorts of things that they sometimes don't know is going to lead to the results that it does. Yeah. But that's where it's for the community and for elders or the family.
Yes, it's a point of concern that we need to look into, surely.
All right. Let me just ask you that same question.
If she hadn't died, there was no problem. Okay, you can do.
I actually disagree with you. I think there's a problem even if she didn't die. But
it came out only because she died. Nobody took note of it, because if it had she not died, there would have been no problem at all. So the issue is that she died, and because she died, it's important for the state to intervene. There are so many things that are happening in our country.
In her case, of course, it's too late for the state to intervene. What's the state going to intervene with now?
No, when the police arrests her parents, okay, there's going to be a deterrent for the rest of the community. And why only the Jain community? All others who are doing things that they should not be doing with their children. And why we keep talking about 13-year-old? Even a 30-year-old may not be able to handle it.
Here in this country, we've been debating juvenile justice. We've said that a 17-year-old gang rapist should not be punished because at 17 he doesn't really know his own mind and he's a child and he's not. How then can we say that a 13-year-old knows enough to be able to fast or not fast for 60 days?
He or she has been indoctrinated into what's believed to be right by the adults. It's a decision that would have been taken some days earlier, maybe a couple of years earlier. It's not that just 60 days ago she decided to take a vow and go into the fasting. Certainly not.
But they're too extreme. I mean, maybe she was indoctrinated or maybe she wanted to do it, but the question is, even if you want to do it, should somebody restrain you?
It's wrong. It's definitely wrong.
She wanted to
at
renounce
the age
the world.
of 13.
She wanted to renounce the world and take Diksha. But the Jain principles do not allow this child to take Diksha. So she was stopped. So she was told, she said, I'll take this path because this is the path I'll, reduce my karmic baggage.
Even in Jain community,
would you allow a 13-year-old child to jump off the second floor? There's no religion attached to it, but because there's religion attached to this, you're justifying it. I think there's a huge disconnect in that. And when you're talking about the state intervention, the state will only come to know, will intervene when they come to know. And they came to know only when she died. So had the state, if there's a deterrent in the beginning, if there's a law which says you can't do these things, then that's state intervention for you.
I just wanted to check on the legal, what the legal position is out here. And who better to get into this than Justice R.S. Sodhi, one of the most respected judges we've had, and from the Delhi High Court. Obviously, all of this really gets tied up in Article 25 of the Indian Constitution. Maybe I'll just flash the relevant bits so that our viewers can also understand. This is what it says. Subject to public order, morality and health, and to the other provisions of this part, all persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience and the right to freely to profess, practice and propagate religion. And then, of course, the other things about how it doesn't restrict the state from making laws restricting economic, financial, and political and secular activity. And also, there are specific provisions for reform in Hindu religious organizations. And then it goes on to say that includes Sikh, Jain, and Buddhist religions. Is the state fully justified in stepping in a case like this and saying, look, if there's a small child who's taking a dangerous fast, we are entitled to intervene because of the health part of it? And there could be other reasons why we step in other cases.
Every religion has a practice, but every practice carries with itself, over the period of time, begins to carry a lot of baggage. It is this baggage which you are now referring to. So, therefore, any baggage that infringes upon the rights of anybody or the constitutional guarantees and its provisions is bad, and the state can certainly interfere. However, if a religion per se, which is allowed to be practiced and propagated, that is a case-to-case study, and the state would be very, very wary to interfere in the religion part of it.
Specifically in this case, Justice Sodhi, a case where a 13-year-old girl is taking a dangerous fast, a fast that eventually leads to her death, would the state have been justified in stepping in and saying you have to stop this and we don't care what you think the religious beliefs are?
It's not like this. You see, the whole problem is we do have existing laws which prohibit suicide and or abetting of suicide. Now, these are criminal laws themselves.
Although this was not specifically suicide, it's not that she set out to commit suicide. It was just that she was doing something that was dangerous. Fasting for 68 days is dangerous. Yes. So, you could.
She was only challenging her faculties. That's it. She was
this was tapasya and not sandhara.
It was a tapasya and not a sandhara at all.
This was not sandhara. So there is a Jain practice called sandhara where you deliberately
set out fast unto death.
Fast unto death, and that's not what she was doing in this case. So it was not abetment, not suicide or abetment to suicide, but a dangerous practice that somebody should have interfered in.
No. If you say the fast is dangerous, it's very, ironical, because in this
fast for a 13-year-old child, you don't think it's dangerous?
Actually, see,
it's dangerous
just
because she died. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been dangerous.
No,
so it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky.
In this 2016, we've just had a Nobel Prize for fasting by Dr. Japanese scientist who has proved that autophagy, he's got a Nobel Prize on it for medicine, and he's proved that autophagy is very important. That is self-eat. What is auto? Auto is self, and phagy is eat.
Yes.
And that only happens in starvation.
I've heard the discussions on what fasting is.
Yes.
Maybe for an adult trying it, you could debate it, and it's a question of how many days. 68 days is stretching.
I mean, that is the state's perception of adult.
A 13-year-old child fasting for 68 days.
See, each one is having a different kind of capacity. Maybe an adult of 30, as he says, does not have a capacity to fast even for a day. But she had a capacity even for 34 days.
So from the Jain community point of view, 68 days fasting is not a big deal. It happens quite often.
Especially when you're taking water, which is considered as the fourth ahar.
Yeah, which is
4 ahars.
Which is scientifically proved. I mean, Anna Hazare also does that.
Right, so that actually brings up the open question. But let me just throw it open to other communities as well. So Rahul, Ishwar, let me get you in on this. Let me extend this argument, because this actually opens up everywhere. And the Constitution, especially when it comes to the Hindu community, the Constitution very specifically says that the state is allowed to make laws providing for social welfare and reform or the throwing open of Hindu religious institutions of a public character to all classes and sections of Hindu, which is obviously something that you've been dealing with when it comes to throwing open the Sabarimala temple out there. And that's the other question where state intervention versus religion has come in. But theoretically, extending this, if you had a situation, for example, where a 13-year-old girl or even a 25-year-old girl, for example, said it's my religious practice, my religious belief that I want to commit sati in Rajasthan, then the state would be fully justified in intervening, wouldn't it?
India is a land of great diversity. We need to give space for religion, spirituality, their pluralism, but we need to maintain a balance which Albert Einstein says there should be religion without science is blind and science without religion is lame. We need not be blind and lame. There is a space for both to exist. There are some gray areas. We should be open to discussion. And rightly said, sati, sati was an absolutely unjustifiable custom. Nobody is going with that. But having said that, there are different temples for males and females. I basically don't believe this is a huge crime. So we need not overstretch our argument of Article 51 into a kind of secular fundamentalism, and don't believe Article 14 and 51 are the only articles in Indian Constitution. Yeah, there are space for others. But the humble submission would be, give the space to religion, pluralism, spirituality. If there is a gross violation as defined by a eminent jurist or even Supreme Court feels so, they can definitely come in. But let the space for this pluralism be there, because that's the great diversity and beauty of India.
Yeah, but can I just read out what the person who actually drafted the Constitution, B.R. Ambedkar, had to say, seeing as we are looking at what the constitutional position is. He did say, I personally do not understand why religion should be given this vast, expansive jurisdiction so as to cover the whole of life and to prevent the legislature from encroaching upon that field. After all, what are we having this liberty for? So that, in a sense, is what the intent behind the Constitution was.
Religion is a very interpretative thing. There are different sects, denominations, they have their own interpretation. So there should be, state should play a secondary role in monitoring, supervising, and intervening if there is gross violation. Unless there is a gross violation or something absolutely unconstitutional, it would be ideal for a pluralistic nation like India to leave them as they are. Because
right.
that
leave
would
them as
only
they are is what you are saying, and that's why Zakia is itching to get in now after all of this, because Zakia is saying, but that's exactly where you can't leave things as they are, because she and others have been leading this campaign against the practice of triple talaq and other practices in the way Islam is sometimes practiced in parts of the country, which you feel are again violative of your rights and of the Constitution and another very important constitutional provision, which is the fundamental right to equality.
I think religiosity is fine, and all of us are religious to greater or lesser extent. The problem arises with institutionalized religion. It is the organization, which is part of the institutionalized religion, which decides for others what they should do, what they should not do, what you can wear, what you can eat, who you can marry, which place you can enter. It gives more rights to the men over the women. So the problem is the institutionalized religion. And I think our Constitution is a beautiful balance between individual freedoms and the right to religious freedom. And it's also a beautiful balance between the principle of secularism on the one hand and individual right to religious freedom on the other. For instance, it nowhere presupposes that males will have precedence over females. And that is one of the fundamental problems in our kind of religiosity in our subcontinent, particularly. So
we in this subcontinent large parts of the world we're taking religion, I think one step far. But let me just get both from Kamal Farooqi and from Maulana Khalid Rashid Firangi Mahali, why they have reacted so strongly to what the state did. So why don't I start with you, Maulana Saab. It's a very strong reaction that the Muslim Personal Law Board has come out with. And you've of course taken on the center, and you're saying that the Modi government is virtually, I think, trying to wage internal war or something like that is what I think you said. Why are you seeing this almost as an attack on Islam?
As far as this particular case of triple talaq or the case in the Supreme Court is concerned, whatever the central government has said in its affidavit, I think that it is an open attack on the Muslim personal law. That's why Muslim Personal Law Board has come out very strongly and clearly stated that we will not tolerate any interference in our Muslim personal laws, which are very rightly and very strongly guaranteed by the Constitution of our country.
That point is well taken up to a point, and here's where the point comes in. What you said would be absolutely correct if you had a situation where within the Muslim community, the Muslim Personal Law Board, for example, was taking cognizance of some of the issues that have been raised, some of the flaws with triple talaq, the way it is actually carried out, some of the problems with maintenance and polygamy and other issues. If you were coming out and reforming it yourself, as has happened in 19 or 20 other fully Muslim countries, in Islamic countries, sometimes these reforms have been carried out. If you had carried out the same reform, maybe the state would not have to intervene. But what people like Zakia and others say is, you are not reforming, which is why they have no recourse but to go to the courts and to the others to try and get change because you're refusing to change?
There are less than 1% of the cases related to triple talaq in our community. Secondly, the All India Muslim Personal Law Board has already started a movement by the name of Reform in Society, in which we have already organized big conferences in which a number in which thousands and thousands of Muslim women have participated, and we are very clearly telling both men and women what are their rights and what are their duties, especially related to the law of talaq and law of nikah. We have already started the reform process, but the state has no business to interfere in the Muslim or in any personal law matter.